Hey guys, what's going on? Paul here. Welcome back to another Cardano live stream. And anyone coming in, please let us know how the audio, how everything is coming through. The main topic for today is governance on Cardano. And we want to get as many questions as possible from the community to figure out what are the questions out there. I'm not fully up to date, but the guests that I have here today, who's been on before, Rick McCracken, very familiar face in the Cardano ecosystem. He's the guy that's up to date on governance. Rick, thanks very much for taking the time to come on again.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. And great timing for this podcast that you're having. Looking forward to the questions from the audience. And the reason the timing is so good is because Sancho Net is in full swing with the technology. So the tech side is getting built out. There were a lot of working groups last year going over the CIP 1694. Now, CIP 1694 is different than the Constitution. So what's coming up next is people are going to need to start talking about what does the Constitution entail, right? And one of the cool things is that there's going to be scripts baked into the blockchain so that when a proposal is submitted on chain, that proposal can check the scripts and say, does it meet the parameters? So is it does it fall within a valid set of parameters that are constitutionally defined and then embedded in a script on chain as either active or not active? So there's all kinds of technical stuff going on. But up this year, there's going to be workshops coming up throughout the year for refining to get this thing bootstrapped, the MVG, minimum viable governance. Remember, this is the minimum viable governance, and then it will evolve and become more sophisticated over time. Now, even though it's a minimum viable governance, it is an extremely advanced protocol. Now, Cardano has learned a lot from history, looking at other protocols such as Dash, Tezos, and Polkadot, and learning from that, implementing that into Voltaire. And probably one of the most sophisticated features of Voltaire, as opposed to other blockchains, is that it actually allows the community to adjust the network parameters, the technical parameters, the economic parameters, and the governance parameters, where it's not just a treasury voting protocol. In some contexts, the protocols are primarily how do we vote to spend a treasury, right? With Voltaire, it's going to give the community complete ownership of the Cardano network financially, technically, and in all respects. So it's going to be very important, groundbreaking stuff coming up. So what's on the agenda for this year? We're looking at the Chang hard fork event, probably in May or June. That's when Cardano will hard fork into a version 9 of the protocol, or will be on the Cardano node 9 dot something, going into the Chang hard fork. Then later in the year, the governance will actually take form, right? So there's two major things. May, June will be the Chang hard fork. And then between then and maybe November, December timeframe, there's going to be a process of people becoming DREPs. People say, I'm going to post a deposit and generate myself a DREP, or people picking DREPs. So that's going to be like May through November, December. People, hey, I like this person as a DREP, and they select them. And then a ratification of a constitutional committee in the out months. Once you start getting around September, October timeframe, then November, December, you pull the trigger. This is post Chang hard fork. This is later in the year that says, okay, ratified constitutional committee, blah, 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 right? So who are the important actors in here, right? Who are the important actors involved? Number one, the ADA holders. The ADA holders, not the stake pool operators, not the DREPs, not the constitutional committee. Number one most important actor in this entire governance system are the ADA holders, okay? So the ultimate cosmic power belongs to the ADA holders. Whether the ADA holder decides to become a private DREP themselves, or if they decide to run as a public DREP, or if they decide maybe they're part of a DAO or a major organization and they want to go onto the Constitutional Committee, right? So it's the ADA holders, and most importantly is the ADA holders delegating to a DREP they find to be competent in some way that fits the direction they want to see the blockchain to go. Right.
Just actually, in case someone hasn't heard of a DREP or what is a DREP for people who mightn't have heard of that before?
Okay, so that's a delegated representative. That's a person who can vote on all of the parameters. So a DREP can vote on all the different types of parameters. I do have the types. For example, a DREP, delegated representative, can vote on a motion of no confidence, a new committee in a normal state, a new committee in a state of no confidence, update the Constitution, hard fork initiation, protocol parameter changes for network, economic, and technical, and treasury withdrawals and info, like an info proposal. So they can, DREP can vote on all of them. The Constitutional Committee can't vote on all of them. They can't vote on no confidence, right? They can't vote on no confidence. Now, the interesting thing with the Constitutional Committee, I know your question was DREP. The Constitutional Committee it's kind of like a rubber stamp committee. If something's constitutional, you vote yes. If something won't break the blockchain, you vote yes, right? So as long as people are submitting good proposals that the aid holders like, that the aid holders think are important, and that the DREPs are voting on those proposals, then if the DREPs hit a threshold it's approved, then the Constitutional Committee would basically just say, okay, it's constitutional, yes, therefore approved, right? And that's the general idea of how it works. So it should be pretty effective. I'm pretty excited. I have a very positive outlook this is going to work. I think it's going to be highly corruption resistant. Sometimes people are worried about corruption, but we're going to have a lot of DREPs. And the more DREPs you have, the more corruption resistance. I don't just use a 50% threshold. I think the governance process is going to be highly resistant to up to 50% corruption. You got 50% good actors, right? It's still going to work effectively. So I'm not really worried about that either. Sometimes people ask about that, but I don't think it's going to be a problem.
Okay, nice. And for other things you mentioned there, Intersect, again, if people haven't heard of the likes of Intersect or where the role they will play in governance for Cardano, where do they sit in it?
So Intersect, that's a really good question. So Intersect is, of course, the MBO, member-based organization, where it has a large number of people in it who are doing all kinds of things. So you got to have people who are, basically volunteers, and also companies, formal companies who built on Cardano. There's 1,000 different people and organizations already on Intersect, and they'll be doing the work. So these meetings that are coming up throughout the year, these are the people who are putting together the meetings to bring the community members in. Some of them are going to be online. Some of them are going to be local in people's towns or countries. And those are the people who are doing the work to put this kind of stuff together. Someone has to edit the SIPs, someone collect feedback. The most important part of MBO that I have participated in so far was the civics working group. We did a subgroup on security, identifying security threats and how methods to mitigate. There are other committees such as the parameter committee, and that's a very important committee that I think the DREPs are going to need to listen to what the parameter committee is saying, because the parameters on Cardano, everything can be tweaked. Every parameter is adjustable. And that's a beautiful and amazing thing. And it's also has some caution that goes with it, is you don't want to tweak them in a manner that causes things to chase the users off, right? You want more users, you don't want less users, you want to bring more users in, right? So the parameter committee, also a very important subset of the Intersect MBO, because they can make recommendations as, should we increase the memory execution units? Should we increase the CPU consumption of the node? Should we increase the block size, right? Stuff like that. And they'll look at it from a very technical perspective. And there's a lot of domain experts that are already on the parameter committee. I believe guys like Marcus Guffler, Andrew Westberg, Martin from Matata. I think some of those are the folks on there. Plus some IOG researchers are on there as well.
Okay, so I suppose to give people an example of, if, say, there was a proposal, block size is one that has been increased a few times over the last probably 2-3 years, and there's always talk about, I've seen you put out a link to Sea Explorer the other day, that's a good one to track. for what's actually used in capacity in a 24-hour period. But say we get to the stage where we want that to be increased, what would be the process from the community to actually get that through governance and get it enabled? I think it's always good to have an example for people to understand how or what phases things would go through.
Yeah, well, here's the process as I imagine it. Being in a decentralized state, the process is going to be a little bit muddled because people can really do anything they want. It is a permissionless blockchain, and that's important. But the general process will be is someone has to submit that proposal and garner support among the DREPs for that proposal. And going back to the DREPs, you can either be a private DREP or a public DREP. So there might be whales or DAOs who say, hey, we're going to operate a private DREP. So let's say you're a whale and you say, I'm just going to vote myself. I'm going to vote on my own behalf. And then you just make yourself a DREP, anonymous. You just don't submit any metadata, and it's just a key hash. And that key hash you can vote however you want. You don't have to go out on social media, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, back to your question. There's a lot to cover here in this hour. So what would the process look like? Someone has to submit the proposal. They have to post the governance deposit, which we can talk about as well here. They post the deposit. The proposal sits on the chain, and then the DREPs start looking at it, and they can start voting yes, no, abstain, or they can just ignore it and not participate at all, right? Or like, you know. So they got to do something. Then once it meets a threshold, so that if you take the total amount of voting ADA that is registered to vote, and you take out all the abstain ADA, let's say the threshold is 51%. Once the yes votes hit that 51% threshold, the proposal executes. It's going to execute at the next epoch boundary.
Nice. I think that's a great stage to get to, that it will be automatic. It won't have to be the different entities have to sign and a certain number of entities have to sign. And will that be done through smart contracts, or how would that be enabled? Say things like the block size or different aspects like that, upgrades to the actual protocol.
So it doesn't require a smart contract. It's all on chain. It's simply the protocol adapts. It adapts to the new parameter, and that now becomes the parameter. It's really that simple. It's
okay. And there was one thing you touched on there. We talked before we went live as well, was there is a fee to put forward a proposal. Do you want to talk a bit around that? And it's not a fee, it's a collateral or deposit or whatever different terms for it, but the important thing is you get it back.
Yeah, deposit. So very important, deposit. So we need inputs from the audience on this one. And to be very clear, Paul and I were talking about this earlier. There's 3 different types of things. There's a deposit, there's a collateral, and there's a fee. In the context of a proposal, we're only talking about a deposit, right? Collaterals you might lose, and a fee you spent it, right? A deposit you get back. That's important. So you're going to get the deposit back. And so how much do you think the deposit should be? That's what you got to ask the audience. Like, what do you guys think? There's some numbers. When I voted on Adam Rush's proposal, I voted for 5,000 ADA. I thought 5,000 is sufficiently high to reduce spam, but not so high that it's financially that it voids valid proposals, where valid proposals become impossible. So it's high enough to reduce spam and proposals that are not serious. However, there was a meeting the following weekend I wasn't in. They were up in Indiana. They'd had a meeting in Indiana, and after thorough discussions, they came up with 100,000 ADA deposit. And then after I listened to their reasoning, I thought, you could be right. 100,000 ADA might be for starters, right? So when Voltaire launches, it's going to be MVG, minimum viable governance, and it will become more sophisticated over time. It's also going to be vulnerable. It's more vulnerable early on to spam and just people goofing off and doing stupid things, right? And so their concept was 100,000 because, and here's the important part, because you can change network parameters that affects tens of billions of ADA. And so you don't want to have like 100 different people throwing out there, oh, set K to 2000 and set A naught to 0 and set, the block size to 1,000,000, right? Or the network will just go, it'll be all screwed up and the incentives will get out of whack and the blocks won't propagate. So that stuff has to be very carefully thought. And that if you spam the DREPs, the problem with spam is the network is resilient, right? It'll fatigue the DREPs and they won't be able to make good decisions. The DDoS attack is not on the network. The DDoS attack is on the humans. That's
I think the important thing you said at the very start is this is minimal viable governance to get started. If it is set at 100,000 or whatever it's set at, that's not what it's always going to be. That can be changed if entities or anybody wants to come in and say that they think it should be something else. That could be voted on just like anything else. That them parameters could be changed. And we got one suggestion of 500 ADA from Duneen in the comments. Anyone else that has input on this? And that's what these types of calls are for, is to get questions and input.
Hold on, you got to read Donan's comment a little bit more carefully. Pull that up there on there. He said 500 ADA minimum fee. Now that's actually, I think it's a good idea. So you would have a 100,000 ADA deposit, right? That you get back after 5 or 10 or 15 epochs. You get the entire 100,000 back. I think a 500 ADA fee is important because that causes the proposer writer. If I write a proposal and post it, I'm imposing on thousands of people to read what I posted. And I think people should pay a fee for that. And then that fee goes into a pot that goes back and pays the voters because they spent their time reading it. Now, currently, SanchoNet does not have a fee. There's no fee. There's a transaction fee, like 0.018 ADA, but there's no fee for actually posting it. I think we actually need both. You need a deposit that's sufficiently high to deter proposals that are not serious or proposals that are not very well supported. And you need also a fee because you're making imprint on the blockchain and you're imposing for all these other people to have to read it. And I think the fee would actually be a better deterrent to spam. Who wants to lose 500 ADA? Nobody. I mean, not any rational actor, right? You don't want to just start throwing stupid proposals. So you would pay your 100,000 ADA deposit that you get back, but you would pay a 500 ADA fee that you don't get back. And that fee pays for all these people having to read what you posted.
Yeah. Just on the comments as well, for people, put any questions you have. EP asked one earlier on. I'm going to bring that one up in a while. And Keith asked about to know exactly what's being built on Cardano. I've covered recently a few of the DeFi projects that have been built and different things. That we won't be getting into that in this video, but if you check out some of the recent videos, you'll see about the different protocols, and some of the next few videos will be diving deeper into them protocols, what's live, and different things you can do there. Actually, we could bring up EPs here now. Is what can we learn from Native's token governance, and do you also see these dApps playing a large part in Cardano governance, as they do in many cases, have lots of ADA and TVL? I think it probably depends on what way the protocols are set up, because some of them, you keep your staking keys are with you, like the likes of Indigo, or some of the other ones when you're getting involved with DEXs, like AMM DEXs, then you give up your staking rights and I suppose your voting rights. So that will be an interesting dynamic to see. We have seen the likes of MinSwap get involved with Catalyst recently, and they have been voting. They have been involving their community in that and allowing them to decide what gets voted on. But what's your opinion on it, and where do you see that going?
Yeah, there's a lot to be learned. I learned a lot from Indigo. Indigo is an extremely effective governance mechanism. On Indigo, you pay 100 Indy to post a proposal. If it If it passes, you get your Indy back. If it fails, you lose it. Okay. You know how much spam proposals are over there? 0. Okay. Uh, so I think that's an interesting thing to learn. And I think there's a lot to be learned from Liquid and MinSwap, as Paul mentioned, because they are a DAO, and DAOs are very important, and their protocols retain that ADA. So with Indigo, the ADA stays in your pocket. With Axo, or it stays in your wallet, stays attached to, and you retain your vote power. With Axo, a lot of the features, the ADA is retained in your wallet, so you retain your vote power until your programmable swap executes. With Liquid and MinSwap, the way those work, because they have to, the way the liquidity pools and the lending and borrowing works, they retain the ADA, but they've been extremely good about doing DAO voting. And so I'm very happy with what they've done, and I think they'll do perfectly fine right with their DAO process. Those people who provided that liquidity, they'll have a voice in the system by participating. So I reckon some of those larger DAOs are going to have their own version of a DREP. They don't have to be public; it can be private. It just says, "Here's the Liquid DAO voter." They're very smart people. They might even make a smart contract that behaves as a voter. And then the DAO members, MinSwap or Liquid, they could say, "Oh, I want this, I want that," and then the smart contract votes on behalf of the DAO. That's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, so one thing from them as well is that they all use whatever their tokens are. That is your voting power. It's one, say one Indy is one vote. And that's always the question with Cardano. Should it be one ADA, one vote, or there's loads of different things out there. Me personally, and even when I talked with Charles, it was like, it's hard to see past one ADA, one vote right now, because you would think that logically the person who holds more ADA wants to see the best for the system longer term. So they shouldn't be voting against it, because they're essentially voting against their own best interest too. But what's your thoughts or the current working model for governance?
Yeah, so Charles was correct with that. It's the definition of a rational actor. All right. Now, I know often people say, "Oh, but what about corruption?" Okay. Well, the first question is, what's your definition of corruption? Just because that person likes X and you like Y, that doesn't mean X is corrupted or vice versa. That just means they want something different. So by definition, if they are an ADA holder and they want what's in their best interest, which is every ADA holder I ever met, they are by definition a rational actor. So they're going to want to make decisions that are in their best interest. Now, that might be different than mine or yours, but it's still in their best interest, and it's still by definition a rational actor. So we'll be fine. It's going to work out. uh, I don't think we have to worry about someone buying. Oh, what would they have to? We won't have to worry about someone buying 5 billion ADA in order to try to corrupt the system. I mean, that's not the definition of how incentives work. So I'm going to buy 5 billion ADA so I can destroy the value of it. I'm sorry, that's just not what people do. Just maybe there's some psychopath that can do that, but they don't have very much money because they destroyed all their money, so they don't have any left. So,
yeah, and that's something we see thrown around a bit, especially with Bitcoin at the minute, with the ETFs, and some people saying, yes, we're going to get ADA ETFs at some point, and then others are saying, no, we don't want them over here because of the power they will get. But like that, they're not going to come in and destroy their own value. Or if they're a rational actor, then they shouldn't. If they have enough money to have that much control, you would imagine they wouldn't be trying to destroy the system.
I agree. And so, the way that generally works, ETFs, Cardano is a permissionless system. If someone wants to launch an ETF, they're going to launch it and no one can stop them. You can't stop them. I can't stop them. The guy on Twitter screeching about it, they can't stop them. It's just not going to happen. I want them to launch ETFs. I want them to put stocks and bonds in the stock market. I want them to run the stock market on Cardano. I want Cardano to run on the stock market. I want Visa Network to take ADA and Cardano stablecoins. I want all of these things to integrate and work smoothly together. And the more financial products and the more financial systems that use Cardano, the better. The more, the better, because it will increase the value of ADA, which increases the security of the network. And that's why I say the ADA holders are the most important factors, the most important actors in the entire process, because they have to be incentivized. They have to want ADA. They have to want to buy it and hold it, and even selling it. Even selling it is fine, because if the price gets too high, they say, "Well, wow, I should probably sell it because it's looking a little toppish, right?" And then they can buy more later on. That's still by definition a rational actor and a pretty good actor you want in your ecosystem. Yeah, all those things are great. I want to see all those things integrate with the traditional finance system and give all those people exposure to the technology crypto has to offer.
Yeah.
And I don't want to. I have a challenge for anyone who disagrees with me. Make me a list of the financial companies who should be excluded. Go ahead and make me a list. I'm waiting. Who should we
Yeah.
exclude?
In a
Right?
decentralized system, who should pick and choose who is excluded?
Start with the top 5 financial operators with like Apple Cash or Apple and Amazon and Walmart, and just start going down that list of the top 1,000. Let me know when you find one you're going to exclude. Sorry, you can't. It's a permissionless system. Even if you want to, you can't.
Yeah.
I want them using it. I want them using it, and that's what we're gonna do with Voltaire, right? So Voltaire is what is the point of Voltaire, right? What's the point? The point is to build out Cardano and integrate it with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
Voltaire is not for managing human beings inside their geopolitical boundaries and determining if you committed a crime. That's not what blockchain is for, and that's not what Cardano Governance does. That's what your local city, state, and federal governments do, right? So that's a different type of governance. The Voltaire governance is on chain. How do I manage the budget, and how do I manage the progress of Cardano? Those are the two biggest questions. So the progress is tied to the budget and vice versa. So you want to build out Cardano to reach all these different financial systems. What do we build next, right? Do we connect it to Apple Pay? Do we connect it to the Nasdaq? Do we connect it to what? And what do we want to pay for in order to do that? That's what
Yeah.
Voltaire is.
We're just probably a bit over halfway now at this point. Questions, keep them coming in the comments. I am keeping track of them as we're going down through here. I see we have, it's interesting, I'm streaming to X or Twitter and to YouTube at the minute. There's over 300 people on Twitter. The comments, if you do comment on the video on Twitter, they should come in here too. We'll be able to take them in. If you're watching on YouTube or Twitter, please do give it a like, share it out, get more people involved, because it's a better conversation and more for all of us to learn, me included, gets to learn as part of these. So I'm just going to catch up on the comments and then we'll go back to a few of the other questions. So
I just did a test comment on Twitter and it showed up. Nice.
So the people on YouTube, you won't see them comments, but in the back end here, we see all the comments coming in, which is great. It's great to see this. It allows more people to get involved. What Ice Coffee said there, Charles said governance was here like a year ago, and then Nico had said, so we're saying governance is about to be complete. So I think when we talked last year, Sancho Net had gone live. So governance was live to a degree on Testnet, or the initial phases of it. What we have right now, people who weren't here at the start might have missed the timeline that you gave, that we'll have the Chang hard fork in May or June, which brings a lot of the functionality onto mainnet. And then towards, when do you think we would see the first votes coming in for it? Is that towards the end of the year?
No, so between May and November, so from May, Chang hard fork, May, June timeframe. Mm-hmm. Then after the chain hard fork, and we're going to have to think about this, right? We're going to have to figure it out. You're going to start seeing people generate their DREP keys and registering as DREPs, either public or private. Excuse me. And then there's going to be notional constitutions posted and notional committee members posting. Then as those start to foment, the Constitution doesn't have to be ratified yet. But as they start forming July, August, September, October timeframe, and people start looking at the composition of the Constitutional Committee, right? They're going to see these keys that say, okay, this committee is composed of, let's say, DC Spark, right? Everyone likes DC Spark. MinSwap, Liquid, Indigo, IOHK, Cardano Foundation, Emergo, SundaySwap, the Ape Society, right? So they see all these different representatives coming in as the Constitutional Committee. That's when the D-reps can start voting. They can say, oh, I like this composition. I've talked to the other D-reps. I've posted this on social media and got feedback from people. I like this composition, and they start voting on it. And then at some point, it'll hit a threshold to where, poof, it comes into existence. It's not going to be fast. It will take time. Give yourselves time. Don't rush it. We do it on SanchoNet. I even made a mistake on SanchoNet yesterday. I was like, okay, do we need to ratify this? And I started typing in some command lines. They're not available in GovTool yet, where you can, like a status board of the Constitutional Committee. There's no status board in GovTool yet. I put the link over in the chat. So I used the command line and I screwed up. And I was like, oh, so my vote's on there because I casted it as a CC member as doing a test. And then Mike Hornan popped in and he goes, no, you made that mistake last time, son. That's an invalid CC member. So this invalid CC member, you can see them trying to vote on chain, but it doesn't do anything. It's just sitting there. You know, you paid a transaction fee to put a little piece of data on the chain, but it doesn't do anything. Yeah. So I put the links, Paul. I forgot to say, I posted them over there in the chat. There's your link to SanchoNet. So if you want to practice being a D-rep, get your butt over there on SanchoNet. We need more people. We got to get more people pounding on that thing. And I put a link in the chat for SanchoNet Gov tool. So you make a wallet on SanchoNet. You have to use either the NewFi SanchoNet wallet, which is in line with that link. You'll find it in there. Or Lace Wallet, or Eternal Wallet. Okay, you got to, so far those three, but they update that link. So if you follow that link, if there's more wallets added, there's a bunch of other wallet makers are in the SanchoNet channels, and asking questions as needed so that they can get their wallets compatible with Voltaire. So we're going to have a huge selection of wallets. I don't think there's anything to worry about there.
Yeah, see your Twitter comment or your X comment there for Sancho.network. That one is actually in the description as well for anyone watching back on the video. And any of the other ones Rick talked about there, I will get all them put into the description after this video here. Interesting comment from Trim here talking about, what about protocols like fluid tokens where you can borrow voting rights for 5% of the price? So you could 20x your voting power pretty easily. We've seen this with, I think, Optum and their bonds before, and people try. I don't know if the one actually got enough of ADA into it in time for Catalyst or not, but thoughts around this? Or is this is part of an open, decentralized network where if someone wants to give up their voting rights, then that's their right, I suppose, as a holder?
Yeah, that's fine. I think that's all fine. That's a great question from Trim. And Trim, great to see you out here, buddy. Yeah, I think that's perfectly fine because someone had to loan that ADA. Someone loaned that ADA and said, hey, I would rather loan this and earn some interest. Someone said, hey, I'm going to take a risk by borrowing that ADA. And they're going to have to pay that ADA back. Or they're going to lose whatever. I don't know what. Anyway, I don't know the extreme details of what Trim is saying there, but maybe we should get Trim on here. But I think it's fine. The borrowing and lending is fine. All that'll work out. Like Cardano has so many holders. There's so many people who they just diamond handed the ADA that it's not like the system's going to be overwhelmed with borrowed ADA. And then there's going to be some risk on behalf of the borrower who borrows that ADA. I think actually there's some good things that will come with these protocols, because then like fluid tokens can advertise that, and they might be able to say, hey, we'll loan if you want to do an independent proposal, we'll loan you 100,000 ADA to post it, and then they're going to have to pay that back with interest. So
Yeah,
it might be
actually,
a business model there.
yeah, potentially could be. And
A Cardano TVL could go through the roof for stuff like that.
from just governance alone. And
Yeah.
like you said,
People
that we're
following it.
driven. We're definitely due a catch up. Let's try and set that up for a general everything Cardano catch up at some point soon. Seen Big Pay in the chat earlier, and DAP Central for Reed there. Make sure anyone who is following Cardano, follow the two of them guys on YouTube, and they will keep you up to date with all the latest. So what else have I missed? If I've missed questions as well, please do ask them again, because as we're scrolling through and as we get caught up in conversation, I might miss a few of them, but it's not on purpose. So Caleb has here, great interview. What are the requirements for being a DREP? Could he become one?
Yeah, 500 ADA deposit. That's it. You can be an anonymous DREP. You can be a self DREP. You can be a DAO DREP if you are, if let's say you participate in any of the DAOs that are out there, lots of them on Cardano. You could be a DREP on behalf of DAO. 500 ADA deposit. That's the only requirement.
Okay. And a DREP then, so a DREP votes on the proposals, but say someone comes in, they can basically say, vote for me as a DREP. Anyone who votes for them, then they are your representative. They do the voting. They have your voting power then, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think at some point, is the DREP a paid position, or is this a voluntary basis, or what way does that work?
It's voluntary.
Okay.
I was hoping they would get paid from fees, but we don't have that feature yet. So maybe someday in the future. It's voluntary.
Yeah, I think at some point it would be a really important position that if they can find ways to I suppose give them something for their time, it would be good, because it means they can put more time into actually reviewing things and really working. I mean, not full time, but putting a decent amount of time into the system.
Well, at least they don't get paid by the Cardano layer 1. They don't get paid by that. No, if you're DREP for a very large DAO and you're responsible for 60 million ADA as a voter, the DAO might pay their DREP. I think that's probably a good idea. If they choose to do so, that would be up to each DAO to do it. Like they might pay their DREP in min tokens or LQ or Indy, right? They could pay their DREP in their DAO token, and then that DREP can vote using the ADA that's available in that protocol, so that it's accounted for. And I think it's better for them to vote with that ADA than to not vote with it, because they can. So they may as well. They should do that.
Yep. Nick, just on ETFs and stuff, we covered that a little bit earlier, just in case you came in a bit later. I will try and put timestamps. I'll rewatch this afterwards and try and put a few timestamps on it. But we covered ETFs and thoughts on that. So I'm just trying to get through as many as possible here in the time we have. Quantum computers, probably a little bit outside of this one and not something I am knowledgeable about. Might pick that up in another one. Try and stick with governance for Cardano for today. If you see any other questions in the comments, Rick, just shout them out, or anything you think we should cover on governance, because it mightn't be just obvious to myself and others that aren't as deep down in it as you.
Yeah, let's poll the audience right now. One of the more controversial things is how much should someone submitting a proposal pay to submit the proposal. So just start typing numbers in the chat, guys. 10,000 and Y, 20,000 and Y, 50,000 and Y, 100,000 and Y. Is 100,000 too high? Is 100,000 too low? Right? Should it be $1 million? Right? So ask us. Throw your thoughts out there so that other people can see. They say, well, or do you agree with 100,000? Do you agree with 5,000? And why? Right? Throw that in the chat so other people can see that you're getting your inputs heard. Right? That's very important.
Yeah, and Duneen has another good one here. How to track the trustability of a DREP. Everyone can promise anything. I presume with Cardano being a public blockchain, we will be able to see what a DREP votes for. So if they have a campaign to say, or they're going to vote in certain ways. If they go against that and you've delegated to them, you can pull that and you can back another DREP then.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, pay attention to your DREP. And are they, in general, like 4 out of 5 votes? Are they voting the way you would like them to? Right? 3 out of 5 votes, are they voting the way you would like them to? And if 3 or 4 out of 5 times they're voting the way you like, you probably got a DREP that you like. None of them are perfect, and none of them are going to vote 100% the way you want. Never going to happen. Never.
Yeah.
I've just seen it so many times. But pay attention to your DREP. If they can 3 or 4 out of 5 times they vote, if they voted the way you like, you probably got a DREP that fits you. That's all I could say on that.
Governance one here, just on Tazerac. Sorry if I get the name wrong, but bigger outlook. When we'll be able to use ADA for groceries, gas, retail, real world utilities. There are different crypto credit cards right now, or debit cards you can use right now. Also, Drip Drops with Main Street are looking to bring something out. I haven't caught up with the team in a good while now, but we had a chat a few months ago, and that's an interesting concept, and where they're trying to make it that any provider can accept any crypto. So more over the next, I suppose, year, 2 years, we're going to see it a lot easier to use crypto in everyday life. I know that's outside of crypto or outside of this governance one. So let's see. Some people are starting to reply on the so at least 10,000 data, or it's going to be too much abuse. I agree on that. When we've went through everything here, Freed says 100K is too much. The value should vary based on what is being proposed and its impact. 100K. Varan says 100K sounds like a good start. EP says 100K. Is the proposal refunded if approved? If it's approved or not approved, you get your 100K back. So the 100K is just your deposit or collateral. So you put it up to get your proposal in, and when the proposal is finished, either way, you get it back. It's an interesting concept, what you said about Indigo, and if you don't get it approved on that, you don't get it back. So that's another way of doing it. If you do it at lower amounts, then maybe something like that at some point, some people might be in favor of. But if you get it back either way, then a higher amount, I think, is needed, especially in the beginning. Like you say, we don't want things overrun when the system is only in its early stages. And ADA is around a long time now at this age. It's a very solid community. So there will be lots of people who believe in the protocol to get these proposals in.
Yeah. Well, here's one way people can game that, just to be clear. The more we're aware of the things that can be gamed, the smarter we are, the better. Okay. Let's say someone submits a proposal to change a parameter, and they just throw it at the chain. They just take 100,000 ADA and they flop it out there, knowing that they're going to get their 100,000 ADA back. They put in a parameter change. Someone else sees that and says, you know what? I want to change it differently. I don't like that one. So they throw a proposal that's different. Like instead of a 0.05, they want it as a 0.03, right? Or something like that. They just want to change that parameter. And then the third person chimes in and they throw another one and they change it to a 0.1 or 0.2. Now you have these 4 proposals sitting out there, all for the same parameter. And then the person who wants to win makes the most noise and tries to bribe the DREPs or whatever, and they try to create confusion. Like they want one parameter to win, so they throw some more parameters that are ridiculous on the chain, knowing that they're going to get their 100,000 ADA back. And then they focus on one and they draw all the attention and say, this one, this one, this one, right? And then the DREPs vote for it. But it's a less than optimal, and it wins, but it's less than optimal. Like, let's say the parameter committee didn't look at it, or the civics committee didn't look at it, and their recommendation is, hey, this is not a good proposal. This is gonna, at first it looks good, but it has long-term consequences, right? And so those kind of things could happen Just to be aware. Just to be aware.
Mm-hmm.
And also, there might be competing treasury proposals where Alice submits a proposal to build feature X, and she submits her proposal for, $5 million or 5 million ADA. And then Bob sees that and goes, oh, I can build that feature X for 4 million. So Bob throws a proposal on chain.
Mm-hmm.
And then Charlie sees that and goes, I could do for 3.5 million. And then Charlie throws that on chain. The DREPs are going to have to read all that stuff. And the first, when it comes to a parameter change, the first one that wins, the first one that passes the threshold is the one that's executed. And then with treasury proposals, they might be redundant. If Bob put in X and Alice put in X and Charlie put in X and they all get approved, they're all going to get their money.
And
all for the same thing.
Is there a time period on this like that? You could, if you're very active as a DREP, you could come in, you could vote straight away on stuff, but then other proposals could come in before the first one has finished. And you think then, well, that one's actually better. Can you change your vote, or is there set times on the voting period, like a week or 2 weeks, or is it open-ended?
You can change your vote. So there's the two things that can change. The ADA holders can change who they are delegated to. Mm-hmm. And that goes into effect at the boundary of the next epoch. And the voter, the DREP, can change their vote, and that goes into effect at the boundary of the next epoch.
Okay, that actually goes back to one of the questions earlier about...
As soon as it passes threshold, though, that baby's going.
Yeah, just what... I can't remember who said it earlier about the DREPs and will it be public. So if your DREP that you voted for votes a way that you wouldn't vote, you can actually remove that power before the vote is passed if there is an epoch boundary between them voting and the end of it. But there's no deadline, is there, on a proposal that it has to be approved by a certain date or it's rejected or anything like that?
Well, there's simply an expiration date. So whether it passes or fails, it's going to expire. So the two dates you're looking for is once it meets the threshold, it's going to execute at the next boundary, the next epoch boundary. Once it hits a yes threshold, it's going to execute. If it never meets that yes threshold, it's going to expire. That's another number we need to ask the audience. How long do you think it should be until they expire? Some of the numbers thrown out there, such as Adam Roosh, who's a brilliant person, he says, if we want faster and dynamic governance, you would use a shorter number, like 5 epochs, 6 epochs, so a lower number, so you can have faster, more dynamic governance and have it expire and fall off the books. And it's either executed or expired. If you want a more thoughtful, deliberate governance, you might need more time. So I lean towards 10. Adam leans a little lower. I lean a little higher, 10 epochs. That's 50 days. Currently, Polkadot is, I think it's 28 days. And I don't recall how long it is on Tezos. On Kujira, the governance deposit is about $2,500, but the types of proposals that can be submitted on Kujira are not quite as sophisticated as or dangerous as that you can do on Cardano. Dangerous is a good word for it. Some of the parameters are now going to be called the security parameters because if you change them, it will either break something permanently, or if you change them, there's no going back. For example, some transaction execution memory units or something like that. I was talking to Pi, and if one of those, if you raise it, you can never lower it. Block size is different. You can raise block size, and then later on, you make it a little bit smaller. Just don't ever make it 0, or that's bad.
Yeah, just on that size, actually, just these are comments from the last question. I'll get to the next ones you asked there in a minute. We might go for another 5 minutes, maybe a few minutes more, depending on Rick's time and questions that come in, but we'll try and wrap it up in around under the hour. So this one here about category based. So this was based on the one earlier about the deposit that you need to put in. Potentially for the time, categories could be good too, because for certain votes, you want them done quick so that in case there's competing proposals and things like that, but for some of them, then maybe you do need a longer time to think it through. And even it depends on the different committees. If the committees have approved or verified something, then maybe it needs a shorter amount of time. But if they haven't approved it, then maybe there's a longer time period needed.
Yeah, and Fareed and Bobby Bits and Fareed, the original Cardano research, if you go over to IOHK.io and go to the research library link, it actually defined that the governance process should have categories just like you described to make sure that the funding, there's analysis. They did analysis and research. Like there should be some amount that goes to marketing. I'll give you some examples. Some amount should go to marketing. Some amount should go to software development to build out the chain. Some amount should go to legal and managerial functions, such as analysis of what needs to be built, right? So that is a perfectly good point, and those are all the things we need to be talking about. I'm glad you brought it up. That stuff needs to be talked about now. Like we need, because we got to understand as MVG comes online later in the year that we're doing that kind of stuff. Jose Di Gamboa was discussing this at length at workshops with budget limits. Okay, this is a good question for the community. Do you want the total treasury right now has 1.5 billion ADA in it? How long do you want it to last? Do you want the treasury to remain in a steady state? Do you want the treasury to grow bigger? Or are you okay with spending the entire treasury rapidly? Those are the kind of things that we need y'all thinking about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think even when I talked to Charles, I was asking him when different things for implementation of like scalability. There was some questions earlier actually about Solana and speed and Cardano and things like input endorsers will make a massive difference to Cardano. And I was asking Charles if the community decided when would we have that, and he said like it depends on the budget. So things like that can be discussed within or voted on within this. Everything will be in control of the community. So I'm going to try and flick down through. I think these were suggestions for before. We have 50K half refunded. 25K might be a decent or too much to pay, but that's what we want. We want community feedback and opinion on this. Let me see what else. And I'm going fast through these. So if I miss any, I am sorry. I'm just trying to see question-wise and suggestions here. So are we talking USD or ADA? It would all be in ADA. So everything for this would be part of ADA. What did Trim say? Scaling minimum delegation based on action and minimum fee as a percentage of delegation. If you have low delegation but are willing to pay a higher fee, it signals sincerity. That's an interesting one too. If you can't come up with, I presume that means if you can't come up with the full deposit, that you're willing to basically pay a certain percentage of it as...
I actually didn't understand that point. I didn't understand what he was saying.
Now maybe I'm not reading that right, but I was thinking that if you didn't have, the Trim can probably clarify, if you didn't have the full, say it's 100K, I don't have 100K to put in as a deposit, I could put in 50K, but I'm willing to sacrifice X percentage of it, which shows that I am a good actor, maybe.
But the deposit has nothing to do with delegation. Those are completely separate.
They're
unrelated.
Yeah, I'll let you.
I don't think I understand it.
If Trim is still there, maybe he can clarify what he means on it.
Yeah.
Let me see what else. And if you see any ones, this is a good one too. So, how are funds distributed? If a proposal requiring funds is approved, is it done in chunks or a single payment, and how quickly? So, I suppose this is something on Catalyst, and sometimes it can take a long time from applying for Catalyst to actually get funding, and now it's in Milestones. So with the likes of this, how would funding be?
Instantaneous. If it gets approved, you get the money, and it's automatic. It poops right out of the treasury into, when you submit the proposal, you specify the payment address. And if it's a treasury withdrawal proposal, and you specified the address at the next epoch boundary, that ADA goes into that address. It's very efficient, which is good. But also, you got to think about, wow, really? So what if somebody does something degenerate and says, oh, I'm going to put in a proposal that says, whoever votes yes, I'm going to give you a cut. So I'm going to pay 100,000 ADA deposit to withdraw 1 million ADA. And everybody who votes yes, I'm going to send a cut to your rewards address. What happens? Well, you better figure it out because it's coming. I don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and that's why I suppose having the big deposit initially is a good thing, or an important thing, to minimize who can actually get the proposals in that you hope they are good actors. And look, there's a lot of people in Cardano for a long time, and they're not going to want to see things like that, because that's not a good look for governance on chain if things like that happen. And actually, I see Trim put in exactly right. Deposit was the word I missed. So if someone only has 10K for deposit but is willing to pay the entire amount as a fee, they'll likely propose something urgent. So
no, that's completely gameable. I can just split wallets and put 10K in a degen wallet and just say, hey, I'm a poor sap from Antarctica. I'm a penguin from Antarctica and I need money. And it's totally gameable.
Okay,
I
suppose
it's some number, whatever that number is. I don't know.
If you're looking for funds back, then you're quite happy to give up 10K if you're going to get it approved. That you don't mind paying 10K out of what you might be requesting. Some of the other proposals that mightn't be to benefit you, or that mightn't be for financial something back, then I suppose there's lots of options out there. Thanks, Reed. Appreciate you tuning in. Final one from me, and then I'm going to give it to you to round out, Rick, and anyone who puts anything else in. Where is the cutoff between Catalyst and governance on chain like this? If I wanted to, say I want to build something on Cardano, from what we've said here, it could be quicker to go through this on-chain governance, but will there be definitions of what has to go through Catalyst and what has to go through, I don't know what we call it. Do we call this Voltaire, or will there be a name on this on-chain governance, or?
Voltaire. But there's no restrictions. There are no restrictions. It is open and permissionless. And I'm going to reiterate that over and over. Open and permissionless. Now, Catalyst, so the way to work is the high level is Voltaire, and it has this much treasury and this much budget. And then Catalyst is a subset. Now, Catalyst is a managed innovation fund where we have known managers who do a pretty good job, in my opinion, of managing the fund. So Catalyst kind of mitigates some of the risk by having people manage it. Now, let's say someone gets approved or disapproved. They might win their Catalyst proposal, but they only won 300K to build Yoroi Turbo or whatever, and then they go out onto Voltaire and they can still apply for another 300K or however much they want on Voltaire on the main chain and get another 300K to build Yoroi Twin Turbo, right, or whatever it is they're building. And so, yeah, what I would like to see happen is someone builds a Hydra head, put in a Voltaire proposal to build a Hydra head where you get like freaking 10 million ADA during peak bull run and use that to buy like 50 million USDT, drop it in on Hydra head and create this freaking super high speed Hydra channel for all the DEXs and SEXs out there to interact with USDT from Cardano. That's just an idea. That's just a thought. I can't do it myself. I don't know how to do it. But that's what I was thinking.
Get the proposal in. If you get the funds, you could find the devs to do it then.
Yeah. So, get a chunk of ADA for yourself to pay for your time and efforts, and get a chunk of ADA that'll belong to the protocol and be, sitting out there on that Hydra head for people to do amazingly fast, degenerate things.
Yeah, I think there's different things like that coming. With Optima looking to do something with a layer 2, I think Fluid as well, and it's interesting times for Cardano. And maybe we'll do another stream fairly soon to cover non-governance, to cover Cardano and where things are at. But I'll give the closing thoughts for today to yourself, to everyone who tuned in with us. Really appreciate it. We just went over 500 people live with us right now between Twitter and YouTube. Great to see the interest in topics like this because they are important. Anyone new, please do subscribe or follow or wherever you're watching from. Thanks for watching, guys. And Rick, I'm going to hand it over to you to give us your closing thoughts on where we are with governance now and what's next.
Yeah, thanks for that, Paul. Okay, so get in there on SanchoNet through the links over there. Paul's got them down in the description, and beat on it. It means battle tested and stress tested. Even if you're just making a DREP, it's quick and easy. And you just go in there and just click around, vote on a couple of things. It doesn't have to make sense. It just needs to put some stress on the system so we can test the epoch boundaries so that people can observe the response of the protocol to how the voting took place. And well, that person voted yes. Did it actually count it correctly in the math? They're still finding little bugs here. And so IOG does an amazing job of doing this formal testing that says this software can do what it is supposed to do. Now, where the humans like y'all come into play is you'll find the parts where the software does something that it was not supposed to do. And those are the kind of bugs that have been coming up on SanchoNet, like from Mike and Johnny and the other folks that are playing around over there. Little bugs popping up here and there. So by the time that this thing goes mainnet, it's going to be very battle hardened. So if you can hop over there on SanchoNet and just, a little mess around with it. You don't have to spend hours and hours and hours. Just goof around with it a little bit and just put a little strain on it and it'll be helpful. Introduce some randomness to it.
Yep, and click random buttons because that's what I always find when people are testing. You need to get people that have not been involved so far to come in and test because they're not going to follow the script that you have for testing yourself. And they're going to try doing things in a lot different ways. So, Rick, thanks again for your time. I really do appreciate it. I learned a lot in this. Hopefully people watching have learned and it's brought up some interesting concepts with numbers and categories and different things for governance. Anyone out there who wants to help shape the future of Cardano, do get involved and we'll catch up. Maybe before the Chang hard fork, we'll do another governance special. But even before that, we'll do, there'll be lots of live streams about Cardano before that. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll talk to you soon.